Hello and welcome, and today we are doing a special broadcast but based on a controversy which has in fact been doing the rounds over the past 48 hours or so. Now, at the center of the latest flashpoint between government and opposition is the scheme of lateral entry. Government has backtracked from the advertisement which it put out recently for posts of 45 appointments to be made via lateral entry. Now, this backtracking took place after opposition as well as several key NDA allies raised concerns about no provision of reservation and also the large number of appointments being considered via the lateral entry scheme this time. But what we are focusing on today is on the principle behind the scheme. What is lateral entry? And are there merits or demerits to this entire scheme? Now, if we look at some of the top appointments which have been made by lateral entry over the years, and some of those names flashing on your screens right now, Manmohan Singh, we have of course got Nandan Nilekani, Raghuram Rajan, Bimal Jalan, Kaushik Basu, Arvind Virmani, and Monte Kahluwalia. These are just some of the names, and these names are not just limited to the UP era. There have in fact been several people who have been brought in via this scheme under the Modi government as well. Now, these are people, some of these names are people who have made exceptional contributions. Keeping politics aside, is the scheme actually beneficial for the civil services? That's what we are discussing at this point. Now, joining me to discuss this further, I am joined on the panel by Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, former member of the ARC Administrative Reforms Commission and also founder of the Lok Satta Party. Joining me also is Sudhir Krishna, former IAS and former secretary in the Ministry of Urban Development. And I'm also hoping to be joined by Sajjan Kumar, political analyst on the show. Now, before we start, we just want to take our viewers through what is lateral entry. If I can just put up that graphics on the screen for our viewers. What is lateral entry scheme? This is essentially a recruitment which is done from outside traditional civil services. Cadre and candidates are hired on contract for 3 to 5 years. There's recruitment to fill mid and senior level positions. And also there's an aim to address the complex policies through external experts who are being brought in. If this is essentially the principle of lateral entry, what is lateral entry that we are looking at? If I can bring in Jayaprakash Narayan right now on the first question that we are asking. According to you, sir, what is the benefit of this particular scheme? Because I believe you are in support of it.
Anima, our civil service recruitment at the national level is pretty good, as good as it can be. It's amazing that UPSC is doing such a wonderful job. But the problem is, after joining service, the incentives are not aligned in favor of the best performance. For instance, there are 3 problems. 1, there is no specialization. Anybody can be posted anywhere practically, particularly in states and increasingly in Government of India also. That means without domain expertise, you are expected to deal with very complex challenges of modern era in a country of 1.4 billion people. It's absurd. The second is, there is no competition for key positions. There's a monopoly for some services like the IAS for all the key positions. Certainly, many of them are serving with great distinction. But there's a lot more talent outside in other services or in the rest of the country, in the market. And the country deserves the best to serve the country, to give the best outcomes. Now, once you create a monopoly for a certain group of people on the basis of recruitment, then you will not get the best outcomes. The third is time-bound promotions. Though notionally there is some empanelment procedure, there is some confidential report system and evaluation. In reality, almost everybody who joins reaches the top without any hindrance. That's why you have inflation of grades. You have chief secretaries, 10, 12 chief secretary rank officers in states. You have 1,000 DGPs rank officers in the states. We made a mockery of it. In the process, between the mediocre and the best, there is no distinction. You can pick up anybody of your choice. So one of the solutions, not the only one, is how to bring the best talent in the country into government parallelly at a sufficiently high level, after we know the degree of expertise, their experience, and their outcomes so far, their performance. And that's what ARC suggested, of which I was a member. While this report was published after I resigned as member, I completely endorsed that. Actually, I was more radical. I wanted every officer of joint secretary's rank and above that to be notified for competition from within the government and outside the government. so that there is no monopoly of any service after a certain level. But the commission has gone halfway there, and the government tried to implement, and because of the reservation issue, I think for the time being, they have not taken it back.
Right. Reservation issue is, of course, the point which is being raised by political parties, opposition as well as some of the NDA allies, as we mentioned. But on this show, we are looking at what exactly, if we keep the politics apart just for a few moments, is there much to criticize in this scheme? Because it is a well-intentioned scheme. A lot of people agree with that. Mr. Sudhir Krishna, if I can bring you in as well, I believe that you also think that the scheme per se is not a bad idea, although you are against the recruitment for certain positions. Is that correct? And if you can explain your position about why you object to this.
See, governance in our country is more complicated than probably any other country. We are a democracy. Population-wise, we can compare with China, but the China governance framework is quite different than ours. So we can compare ourselves with the USA to some extent, but the USA, the states and the municipalities are thoroughly empowered. And in our case, the municipalities and panchayats are rarely empowered. So these are but they have a lot of role to perform. So this governance framework makes it a different requirement for government positions, number one. Number two, in government, we have to understand the structure. You start with section officer, under secretary, then go to deputy secretary, director, and then joint secretary, then additional secretary, ministers, and so on. And there were bodies like planning commission and so on. Now the joint secretary is at the upper middle level. He is not head of the ministry's bureaucracy, and he is something like a colonel in a colonel in a brigade of the company of army. You cannot change a captain of a unit of the army. You cannot change a lieutenant colonel of the battalion just from outside. You cannot bring that. It doesn't work that way. So but you can get a minister from outside, which we are getting. We are not getting a defense minister who is invariably. Sometimes we have, but normally we don't have a minister of defense who is an expert in defense matter, who is a former, defense service officer. So there is generalist cadre is very much required in general, number one. And number two, the joint secretary's position is in hub and spoke model. The joint secretary is the hub. And I tell you what are the spokes for him. The spokes are multifarious. One is the states. He has to interact, negotiate with the states. No government of India's program or mission can succeed unless the mission in charge is able to have a kind of equivalence and equilibrium and a vibrant equilibrium with the state governments, his counterparts. That is number two. Then other spokes are parliamentary committees are there, parliament itself is there, C and AG is there, and at the back of the mind of the officer who is handling the program, division head, the joint secretary is the head of a division, he has to also keep in mind what is happening in the field, the district, what is the formation of the governance at the field district level, what is the role of panchayat and municipalities, and so on and so forth. The whole complexity has to be kept in mind, understood. And it is not like you publish a research paper, wonderful research paper in international journals, and then you become an expert, and then you become a good joint secretary. It doesn't work that way. You can get such a person as a specialist advisor in planning commission, you can get, and there are advisors in the ministry. And I tell you one more thing, Government of India has got specialized services, Indian Economic Service, Indian Foreign Service, Indian Police Service, Indian Forest Service. These are not ordinary services. We cannot say they are run-of-the-mill services. You look at the people who come into those services. They are many, good number of them are graduates from IIT, IIMs, and equivalent institutions, and so on, PhDs, whatnot. And there is a training program. There is a program to upgrade the skill of the officers. Should we not give attention to what arrangements are there? Should we always try to ignore what is going on, what improvements are required in the present system, and try to make a quick fix and patchwork? This patchwork is going to collapse. It is not only collapse, it is going to harm the system internally. This whole lateral arrangement, lateral entry in a large scale at the upper middle level, it is going to hurt the system almost irreparably, I tell you, if it continues. It is a very dangerous thing. Yes, you bring top level positions. As I said, advisors you get, no harm. And you must get, rather, I will say we must get advisors. subject matter expert, but not at the level of advice. Just like I said, a commander, a unit commander cannot be from outside in army. You can never get it. He has to be from the army only.
Okay. Right. Let me bring in Sajjan Kumar as well. Mr. Krishna has made that point that while in at the top levels, maybe we can bring in lateral entrants, so to speak, or domain experts as advisors, but in the mid-level, it does not work. Sajjan Kumar, what are your opening comments as far as the pros and cons of lateral entry scheme is concerned?
Look, the framework of this sort of argument relies on the basic argument which was given at the time of independence, because even in the Constituent Assembly, there is a context wherein Patel was more in favor of the continuation of the same civil services. And the argument was that we need integrity, honesty, discipline, and pan-Indian commitment along with efficiency. But now with the changing needs, there are requirement of the domain expertise, and that is why in the second administrative Reform Commission in 2005, chaired by Virappa Moila. Virappa Moila himself was an OBC now, because now the question of the reservation is there. There was a feeling that now we have specialized needs, which needs the experts, domain experts from the technological background, from the financial background, from diplomatic backgrounds. So that is why it was recommended, and the recommendation was very strong that it needs to be by domain expertise. And since it is a domain expertise domain, therefore, there cannot be any provision of the reservation. So this is one. Now, when you say that at the mid-level, they can not come, because at the top, they can come and advise, they can come as a consultant, but they cannot come at the mid-level. So this means you want their expertise, but you do not want to see them at the decision-making level. So this is a kind of a resistance by the existing civil servants to anyone from the outside to share the power with. So this is a kind of a very self-serving kind of outlook, which doesn't take into account that there are other experts. Second thing, the ones who are coming from the outside, say, for example, a technocrat who has spent at joint secretary level after spent 15, 17 years, what sort of salary parity you are giving? The person must be making outside 2 to 3 to 5 times more salary. So if he or she is coming there, if you do not give some sort of a prestige and the decision-making power, the scheme doesn't work the way as is being argued. If you can bring someone at the level of the consultant and advisor, why can't the person can come at the midway in the decision-making thing? Secondly, in politics, we already have a lateral entry. Ashwini, Vaishnaw, then our foreign minister, Jaishankar, etc. This is a lateral entry. You do not have a political background, yet you come because of your expertise, and they have their utility. So why can't that sort of experiment be also done in other branch of the state, that is bureaucracy? Because our global needs, in terms of the way we are competing, we have the kind of a collective vision. It requires the domain expertise. So if they can come as expert, as advisor, as consultant, why not share the decision-making power also with them? That doesn't make any sense. So that is why I think lateral entry is a necessity. The provision of the social justice and equity is also our policy. So there can be a balance into that. There's no two ways about it.
Right, a balancing act that the government will have to make. And we'll also touch upon in more detail on the fact that you mentioned, Sajjan Kumar, that there are global aspirations which India has in terms of reaching a certain level in the global economy, in the global stage. And for that, maybe skilled experts are needed. Or domain experts rather are needed in bureaucracy. Let me bring back Jayaprakash Narayan, and we'll now start looking at certain aspects or concerns which have been raised about lateral entry scheme. Mr. Narayan, there are questions about transparency. Again, politics aside, but one of the points which had in fact been raised by the Congress was that there are certain people of a certain affiliation who are being brought in via this lateral entry scheme. Now, we are not debating on whether that allegation is right or wrong, but there are concerns which have been raised about transparency or the manner in which these recruitments are done. What would you say about that?
I mean, let's go by past experience. You have UPSC, which is doing a remarkable job in a very difficult country where there will be enormous influence peddling. State public service commissions are not that good most of the time, sadly. But we can trust the institution that is serving us well. Two, you create mechanisms. For instance, the Administrative Reforms Commission suggested creation of a civil services authority with 5 members. One of them is the Secretary Government of India. The chairman and other members will be appointed by a committee constituting the Prime Minister of India and the leader of opposition. So create a body like that. and let them supervise this whole system. There are ways of doing it. Remember, every country outside the Indian subcontinent actually has parallel recruitment. 40 to 50% of bureaucracy comes in that manner. They're able to manage that. Why can't we manage? And you yourself showed on the screen the eminent Indians who became parallel recruits and served the country wonderfully. Dr. Manmohan Singh came as an official at a middle level, became the finance secretary, RBI governor, and the Prime Minister of India. With great distinction, he served as the finance minister and Prime Minister. Nobody doubts his integrity and commitment. And similarly, many other people in various governments. So let's create a system. Because the system is likely to be politically managed, we don't want it. Right now, what is happening? You create a pool of 20 people within government, or each is eligible for the same job, and you pick up your crony of your choice. Are we saying honestly that every civil service appointment in the key positions in India is really based on merit and competence and ability and integrity? I will show you thousands of examples across the country. So
Okay.
we disoperate in the system. Finally, what is our situation in the world? I have a list here of 50 countries, Tamina, large economies, $200 billion and above GDP. I have taken all the standard indicators of, how we are performing as a country. I'm saying it with great pain. While we are trying our best, in some ways we've done remarkably well, and there's some improvement in some indicators in recent years. Almost on every indicator, India stands in the bottom 5 in the company of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. The system is functioning superbly. If somebody says, look, don't upset it, I understand. If the system is not delivering the way it should, then if you don't look for reform, in economic reform, administrative reform, political reform, other reforms, that means we want status quo at the cost of the future of the country.
Right.
And if you really open it up for competition, many in the IAS and other services will do remarkably well. But there'll be competition instead of an entitlement. Today there's a monopoly. There's an entitlement.
Right.
Change it for heaven's sake for the country.
Right. Mr. Sudhir Krishna, please come in on this and some of these aspects which have been raised by Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan there, that, there are concerns about corruption. If somebody stays in a particular job, a particular department, a particular ministry for long, there are concerns of corruption which creep in. Also, I'd like to point out, as both Sajan and Jayaprakash was saying, that a lot of international committees, including in the UN, have functioned via deputations through lateral entries. If we look at global examples for that matter, there is precedence there as well. So why do we ignore some of these concerns which are being addressed through this scheme? So, that is the idea, of course, behind bringing in the lateral entry scheme also, that not only will it add new vigor, but maybe it will help in curbing corruption. And also that is something that internationally several important bodies, UN bodies included, are following.
Yes, things are. As far as the corruption part is concerned, you mentioned a person occupying a position for a long time and so on. There are government norms of rotation. The job rotation, rotation from a seat, there are standard procedures are there. Nobody can be in a position for more than X number of years. And very senior positions starting with, joint secretary and above and so on. Anyway, it is not more than 5 years. And secretaries are there for 2-3 years only. Many of them retire also, and sometimes they are transferred also. So that part is already taken care of by the system. And I tell you that a system is as good as we make it, we make it run. There is a system, you don't allow it to operate, or you puncture the system here and there and they say it is deflated, it is not in proper shape. It is because you are puncturing the system again and again and then blaming it. That is also not good, So we have to go into the root cause of the whole thing as to why the country has not been able to, reach its miles where it should have reached. It is not because of the failure of bureaucracy, it is because the bureaucracy has not been managed well. The bureaucracy has to be managed by system and so on. So a lot of issues are there. It is difficult to say in few minutes, but we have to go into depth of the matter and I'm sure maybe third Administrative Reforms Commission can be set up now to go into that if required. That's okay. But having said that, I would say that once again, we do require fresh thinking people from outside the government. And I tell you that there are positions. Can we say that district collector should be taken from outside? Can we say district superintendent of police should also be taken from outside open market? You see, it is not at all going to work. We have deflated the system, punctured the system here and there, and we are going to hammer it to its death, I think, if we go on expanding this concept of lateral entry at all levels. As I said earlier, lateral entry at policy making levels has been going on. Indian Foreign Service, for example, they spend their whole career of 30 to 35 years, and then they become ambassador here and there. But still, we take ambassador from outside. We take a noted economists. We take people who are in different fields as ambassadors here and there. So occasionally we can do that. It is done everywhere. Our planning commission is the think tank. It is free to all experts. They come, and we have got Indian Economic Service and so on and so forth. Indian Telecom Service. And as I said earlier, that experts are there. But if you don't encourage them, if you don't provide for their training, if you let them languish and misuse their arrangements, administrative arrangement, and then we say system is not working. So these are all things have to be seen, and these people, I would say one more thing, there is a huge, this joint secretary level position is not policy making level. There is a misunderstanding. Joint secretary level is to manage the programs. It is a maintenance function mostly. Advisor to government, yes, here to his secretary particularly. That's all.
Right.
The secretary who advises the minister and cabinet forms the policies, planning commission recommends the policy, etc., etc. It's a very big hierarchy. So this joint secretary level, I said, is a fulcrum level. It should not be disturbed. Like in the army, I said earlier, you cannot disturb. You cannot get a colonel from market, however he may be expert in strategic planning and etc., etc.
Right.
A colonel of the battalion cannot be from outside. He has to be from the army only.
All right. Mr. Krishna, point taken, and we'll take that question further to Sajjan Kumar. But before that, I want to just put out this tweet which has been put forth by Nirupama Rao. She's, of course, a supporter of the scheme and has said that today we need more specialists and experts in the system. We must increase recruitment via UPSC exams as well. But we must become more future-oriented. Change does not come easily in India, and we are extremely wedded to precedent and insular and conservative mind, not risk-taking mindset, and trapped in a labyrinth of our own creation. This is, of course, yet another voice which is supporting the lateral entry scheme. But Sajjan Kumar, if we can take that question which has been, the aspect which has been raised by Mr. Krishna there, that, we can also look at the other side of things, the impact that lateral entry will have on the system as such, on the bureaucracy as such. Do you think, over a period of time, these sort of entries and the numbers are going up? That's another objection which had been raised by opposition parties and some of the NDA allies as well, that such a recruitment, an en masse recruitment, 45 posts which were being put up for lateral entry appointments, that is something that people objected to as well. And in the long term, it might end up demotivating career bureaucrats. Sajjan Kumar.
No, the point is well taken. If you see, one of the steel frame of the civil services is the kind of pan-Indian outlook that they are having above any parochial kind of outlook that is there. So that point is there. But then the prime question, why do we need a lateral entry, is because of the generalist versus specialist debate. Now, when most of the bureaucrats who are coming from multiple disciplinary background, when they sit into the interview, the final round, the one who are taking their interview are not looking into the expertise of the bureaucrat. They have a very ideal expectation of an ideal bureaucrat who would be serving the society. So that generic point is there. But when in today's and contemporary time, you need specialists. You have green energy goals, you have AI goals, you have technocratic goals, you have financial ambitions, you have complicated kind of a mental health sort of a scenario, which required bureaucrats who have the job to implement a sort of domain understanding. Therein bringing them in for a limited period, 3 to 5 years, is not going, it may shake and it may create a sort of a healthy competition. So looking from the other side, why do we not assume that this will further create a sort of a positive pressure on the career bureaucrat to also acquire some sort of a bureaucracy? So until a proper rehaul of the Indian Civil Services exam doesn't happen, we need lateral entry, because we cannot wait for the third administrative reform commission. Because in the meantime, there are need of that. You cannot have general physician, looking into every department of a hospital. You cannot have a player having expertise in one sports, saying that since I play one sports, I have a generic understanding of the world of sport. So therefore, our needs have changed, and therefore the entry and the necessity of having the expert is also required. And this is something which is quite urgent. There cannot be any delay into that. And that is why the more you delay it, it will be up to the kind of the politician and the generic bureaucrats who will have the integrity and the commitment, who may work day and night, but yet they may not have the kind of understanding. And that is why why do we take the lateral entry bureaucrats? It should not convert into the spoil system of USA. That sort of caution should be taken. But if there is a transparency, if there is a kind of the fairness, then this is going to create a sort of an internal pressure on the career bureaucrats also. Otherwise, how do you understand somebody may having a background in literature, heading the finance ministry or science and technology ministry?
Right. I am running out of time on this very important discussion, but we'll just give 30 seconds for closing comments to all of you, starting with Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Of course, that we are not talking about affirmative action here. Because those are some of the concerns which have been raised by politicians. But in terms of what people should take forward, what needs to be done with lateral entry scheme, those are the final thoughts that I want from all of you, starting with Mr. Narayan.
Very quickly, Tanima, we must recognize that the point of entry cannot determine the trajectory forever. It must be based on performance. It must be an endeavor to get the best in the country to serve one-fifth of humanity. We cannot take administration as a cavalier exercise of a few people whose prerogative it is because they joined government at the age of 23 or 24. The second is, affirmative action is necessary, but not in the form that is implemented in the country, because, you're only talking about 45 joint secretaries. There are 93 departments of government in the union government, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. I'll have to give time to the other two. Mr. Krishna, next.
So you have a more innovative model whereby some kind of a weightage is given to the social and economic criteria and gender criteria.
More innovative model is required.
Everywhere. Don't say one post is only limited to this community.
Yes, Mr. Krishna, we are running out of time, so I need to give closing comment time to everyone. Mr. Krishna.
I think the present arrangement of the Indian Administrative Service officers, starting from district to the states to the government of India, is a good model, suits our country's special needs, and it has wonderful features which needs to be given attention and strengthened. The weaknesses have crept in; those weaknesses have to be taken care of, and the strengths have to be nurtured. And definitely, this model will work very well, and it has to be supported. And lateral entry, the way it is being mooted, propagated, is not at all good for the country.
Okay. Sajjan Kumar, final 10 seconds.
Yeah, the profile of the civil services should evolve and reflect the aspirations of India. It should not just be demographically representative, but also representative of the domain expertise also. That is the need of the hour.
All right. I thank all my guests for joining me today on this discussion on lateral entry scheme, the pros and cons of it. Thank you so much for joining us, and news and updates will continue right here on NDTV.